This is your weekly tech recap with Jamal Abbott. News and insights about the tech world in plain English. Thank you for listening. In today's episode, T-Mobile calls out Verizon and AT&T on their 5G deployments, while they still make the case for a merger with Sprint. AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile released their quarterly results. We have more changes in the OTT Landscape. Verizon 5G launches in 20 additional cities, while the Samsung S10 5G phone is now available for pre-order, and then Q&A from the Quora community. Okay, so we have an interesting story here with T-Mobile. So we know that T-Mobile has been the underdog, the aggressor, and has been making a lot of noise in the market today about 5G and how they're the best network out there. And this week they released a blog post by their CTO standing for Chief Technical Officer. And they basically called out AT&T and Verizon for not doing a good job with their 5G deployments. In the nutshell, they basically say that the technology is not mature and that they should have waited, kind of like what they're doing right now, should have waited with not deploying this service out for the customers to test, and that they have a better approach with the spectrum that they have, as well as once the technology is more mature, they'll get it out there to the customers and then not have it to where it's such a spotty and inconsistent experience for the end users. So right now, the 5G service is available in 2 markets for Verizon. Most of the reports are out there is that it's inconsistent. You have to be in specific areas in order to lock into a 5G signal, and it doesn't work too well if you take your 5G smartphone into buildings or into other areas that have like dense property. So like if there's a tree in the way, or if there's a person going into a building, you will lose that 5G signal instantly. And that has to do with the type of frequency that they're using right now. And this is at the millimeter wavelength. So it just doesn't work that well from a technical perspective. T-Mobile's basically saying that they shouldn't be testing this on the customers that are paying for service. T-Mobile does have plans to use this multimeter wavelength signaling at some point during the deployment, but they're going to be using some other frequencies that work better to cover larger areas. It's not going to be as fast as the other technologies that Verizon and AT&T are currently using, but they're going to say that this is a little bit more stable. And what they're also painting the case for is a merger with Sprint, and if they merge with Sprint, they'll have some other access to some other spectrum, some other technologies that will allow them to provide the best experience for 5G. So that's what the blog post was all about in a nutshell, and it's just interesting to see T-Mobile go on the offense. They're the number 3 player in the market, and they're really trying their best to step up to Verizon and AT&T, which I totally agree with. You got to fight, you got to hustle and scrap. I don't think really T-Mobile is being heard that well from a Verizon and AT&T perspective. They're pretty much busy with getting the service out there. T-Mobile's technically speaking on the sidelines as we speak, but they're getting ready to deploy this network. So T-Mobile's talking, but they're not quite walking as of yet. And no dig on them. This is just kind of where we're at right now. But the blog post is interesting and definitely worth a read if you want to get a little bit more details on what's going on in the background with some of these technologies. And it does a pretty good job of explaining this and not having it to where it's going to go over your head if you're reading this for the first time. Another interesting thing that we had talked about in the previous week was Sprint's struggles and they're also trying to build a case to merge with T-Mobile. What came out recently this week was the fact that they acknowledged the fact that they haven't made the investments into their network. And that's the reason why their network is underperforming across the board for their customers. There was also another report about how they're actually leaving Sprint and then going over to T-Mobile, so really getting ahead of the curve, and they figure they cut their losses now and then get the better service and quality that they're expecting. So Sprint is not making any excuses. They're not making any complaints about the fact that they haven't invested into their network, but they're just saying like, okay, these are the struggles that we have right now, and that if we don't merge with T-Mobile, it's only going to get worse, and we actually don't have the resources and the capabilities to really offer the best 5G type of service that the consumers are expecting and demanding. So that was the information that they presented to the FCC, and we're still waiting on the process to play itself out. Once again, both T-Mobile and Sprint are optimistic that everything's going to go through. And we learned last week how there's rumors and just rumblings about this current deal structure not being approved by the Department of Justice. But we're still waiting, and that's what's going on with Sprint and T-Mobile, and we'll see what happens. Our next story involves the quarterly updates for AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. So this was a time for these companies to report how well they're doing to investors, to shareholders, as well as to the government about how they did in this first quarter. So lots of news. We're going to compact this down, and we're going to dedicate an episode for these quarterly results. So we're actually missing Sprint and then Charter. They have not released their results as of yet, but by the time you're listening to this recording, they should have actually done this in the next coming days. Starting off with AT&T, who is focusing on paying down their debt and then making further investments into their network, into their products. One interesting note about their 5G product, which they have out now to 19 cities and select areas in those cities, their business customers have actually used 5G to replace their traditional internal networks. So if you are familiar with networking, there's a router, there's LAN equipment, and then that equipment is connected to like a Wi-Fi network, something along those lines. So they're actually bypassing that equipment and then replacing it with a 5G router, which provides direct access to the internet, and they're bypassing that altogether. So that was interesting. That came from that quarterly report from AT&T. Verizon also notes that they're also pleased with their results and with their deployments in Minneapolis and Chicago. The one thing to note about Verizon, even though there's been negative coverage about their 5G service being spotty and unreliable, this is exactly where Verizon wants to be at. They're positioning themselves as the pioneer, the front runner for 5G. And they've said that they've actually been testing this for the last 2 years. So they want to make the tests. They want to figure out the bugs. And that's just who they are. And they pride themselves on being out there in the forefront and then being able to provide the roadmap for the rest of the industry. T-Mobile, on the other hand, has a customer-centric view, and this reflects in their quarterly earnings report. One interesting note that caught my attention was the fact that they had 24 consecutive quarters of 1 million or more customer adds. They also pointed out on the quarterly earnings call, and wasn't subtle. I mean, they flat out called out Verizon and AT&T for losing subscribers during the same period. And my thoughts about this is all great. This is the reason why we have competition in the market. If we had one or even two players that were dominating the market, you're not going to have that level of competition, which ultimately drives down prices for the consumers. And that also gives you more choices to choose from. And like I said, we'll go a little bit further into this and we'll look at the numbers just a little bit. The reason why we're going through and trying to understand what's going on with these quarterly reports is because it gives you a roadmap. It gives you a vision of how these companies are seeing themselves for the future and how they want to bring that service and that experience to the customers. And then for you to understand this gives you an idea of where they're going and then how this aligns with your business, or if you're just a consumer, how this aligns with how you want to use this service to improve your life or just to get things done concerning your life. So very important. We're going to dig into this more. So stay tuned and we will get you that information that you're looking for. Another thing to point out with the quarterly reports, and this ties into the changes in the OTT landscape, OTT being over the top, and then that meaning that we were delivering video and TV services over an existing internet connection. So how it's done before, like we've recapped before, if you're getting traditional TV, it may come from a satellite service provider, or it might be that cable coming into your house or coming into your business. You plug the TV into that, connects to a box, and then you're able to watch TV services from there. So Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon, they're continuing to lose customers, and they had a combined total of 800,000 customers that they lost during this first quarter. And this is all because of the changes in technology, like we talked about with OTT. So it's just another option for consumers, but they are definitely ditching the traditional linear TV services, and it's not going to stop from here. What these companies are doing to offset these losses is to do a couple things. So they might be bundling some of these video services with their existing internet options, or maybe they might bundle that with their existing wireless solutions, or what they might be doing all together. And this might be with some of the smaller companies that we're not really talking about today. They're actually not focusing on delivering TV services, and they're putting all their chips in with internet services altogether. So they're making money with internet, not so much with TV, but this is how they're offsetting the losses with TV services, is by going all in with broadband internet services. As far as additional changes to the OTT landscape, we learned that AT&T will be having a media day for their Warner Media division, and they're going to be releasing their streaming product either sometime in September or October of this year. So this is their direct-to-consumer product, and they're going to include quite a bit of their content, their videos, and their TV shows directly from the Warner Media vaults. So look for that later this year. Another interesting thing that popped up this week also was that Comcast was looking to sell its 30% stake into Hulu back to Disney. So last week, AT&T recently sold their stake. It was about 9.5%. And then they actually got back $1.45 billion. Comcast is looking to possibly sell that, mainly because they're going to be coming out with their own direct-to-consumer product, and that's going to be through their NBC Universal portfolio. That's supposed to be coming out sometime in 2020, but they're kind of weighing their options right now. So it's either they hold it, and with Disney right now, they own quite a bit of Hulu, so they don't really have a whole lot of say-so in the direction of this platform. So they can either hold it, they can either sell it, but the long-term vision for them is for them to have their own streaming product and not be so reliant on some other third parties and over the content that they don't really have a whole lot of control over. So once again, too, the consumers are leaving traditional TV services. So the bottom line is that long term, it doesn't make sense for Comcast to hold on to the stake for Hulu when they have their own content, they have their own TV shows, and they can easily go direct to consumer. We won't know how successful this will be until it's actually put out there. But a lot of these companies today, they're going directly to the consumer, and putting their stuff out there, just like what Netflix has done, just like what Hulu has done, and just like what Amazon has done. So they're really competing against these tech companies that have been doing this for a little while now. So it should be interesting to see what happens with this. So what I'm thinking here too, as we're on this subject, something's not going to work, right? So, okay, Disney Plus, we know that's out there, or at least it's coming out later on this year. We already have your Netflix, like we talked about. We already have Amazon. And then you have these other companies that are coming out with their direct-to-consumer offerings. Something's not going to work out in that you're going to have your people out there that want to watch their favorite or specific shows, but I don't know if they'll be willing to pay for that streaming service product, not unless it's, priced right. If it's a live TV service, it's going to be somewhere around the $50 to $60 range, and that might be a little too much for some consumers out there. But if it doesn't include live TV, it's just the on-demand video where you watch it at any time. You don't have to, wait for it to come on at a specific time. And if it doesn't include live sports, those are cheaper, and the market has already proven that they're willing to take on quite a few of these. So it's not uncommon for somebody to have Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon, and then pay for all those things on top of having maybe a live TV service. So at some point, we're going to run into an issue where there's too many of these out there and something's not going to work out. So I don't know what it's going to be, but as we get to 2020 and beyond, we're going to see some of these companies actually fall off the bandwagon, and that this area where they're going directly to consumer, it's not going to work out for some of these companies. So I don't know who it's going to be, but I can guarantee you we won't have this many direct-to-consumer options out there for consumers to choose from. Another interesting announcement that came out related to OTT was the fact that Verizon and Google are partnering to deliver YouTube TV on any device if you're a Verizon customer. Now, there's not a whole lot of details with this announcement, other than this is another option that Verizon is giving their customers for individuals looking to watch video content. So we already learned that the traditional linear TV services, Verizon's losing quite a few of those customers, but where it's unclear that if YouTube TV is going to be like a discount for existing Verizon customers, or if there's any other incentives for Verizon customers to jump on the YouTube TV, which is the live TV service that is meant to replace like a traditional satellite TV or just a traditional cable television service that you would get from your local provider. So we're still waiting for more information about that. If this does give some type of discount for Verizon customers, I think it's really going to take off. Our last story is Verizon 5G, and it's being introduced to 20 additional cities. So there's quite a few cities. Go ahead and head over to the website, jamalabbott.com, and check out this episode for this list. And I'll just highlight a couple of the cities that are on this list, which include Atlanta, Boston, San Diego, and Washington, D.C. So 20 cities. And as we learned earlier in this episode, just be prepared if you're in one of these markets. You will have access to 5G, but it may not be all that widely available. So another couple caveats too with this, you'll need a 5G phone. So it's either an existing Motorola smartphone that has a 5G mod that gives you access to the 5G network, or if you want to wait just a little bit and you want to put some money down, you can get the Samsung S10 5G smartphone, and that's available for pre-order. So this retails for $1,300, and you have to have a certain data plan with Verizon. So they're saying that you need the above or beyond unlimited plan to use the 5G service with your 5G smartphone. And if you do that, you have unlimited data, you get the hotspot, you get the 4K HD video streaming. But once again, too, this is in limited markets. limited areas for the 5G service. So if you're in that area and you want to take this on, go ahead and by all means jump on it. The other thing too that also came about this week is that Verizon was charging an extra $10 a month for users to jump on to the 5G networks. That's been waived, at least for temporarily. So if you already have this plan and then if you were already planning to upgrade your smartphone and you want this 5G smartphone, go ahead and jump on it. But if you want to wait, that might not be a bad idea either. So this is available. Go over to the website, jamalabbott.com. Check out the 6th episode for the weekly tech report, and then you'll have a list of cities available to you. All right, so we are transitioning now to the Q&A. And if you want to ask a question, you can hit me up in a couple different ways. I'm on social media, pretty much on all social media platforms, and that's at Jamal Abbott. If you want to send me an email, it's jamal@thephoneguy, and that's THA, thephoneguy.com. Shoot me an email. Be happy to answer any questions that you have. Our first question comes from Laura, and she asks, is there such thing as too much contact with customers? And I would say, I don't think there's too much contact with customers, other than if your customer tells you that you're contacting them too much. It's been my experience, though, that most of my customers are pretty happy to hear from me when I'm following up with them on an issue that they need help with, or if they are planning to have like a technician or there's something being changed with their service. For the most part, they're pretty happy to hear that they're getting an update, and it's because of their previous experiences where they're not hearing from a technical staff, they're not hearing from a customer service representative, or they're having people showing up and they're not being notified in advance that some activities are taking place with their service or with their account. So things of that nature. Having contact with your customers is a good thing, and I like to try to call my customers as much as I can, shoot them an email, shoot them a text. If I hit them up in those 3 different ways, you can't go wrong with that. So lots of communication with your customer is a good thing. It keeps them informed, and they really appreciate it in the end. And so just keep in mind too that this is something that they're not getting anyways, especially in the technical world, where technicians tend to be not the best communicators out there, but they're going to appreciate you for checking in on them, for giving them the information that's relevant. And as long as they're not telling you that, hey, you're contacting me too much, and as long as you're not bothering them, you'll be fine. Give them the contact that they want and that they need, and they'll be happy and they'll thank you for it in the long run. This next question comes from B, and B asks, what is 5G spectrum? So we talked about spectrum quite a bit in this episode today, and I didn't really give a proper definition. So that was kind of by design. So 5G spectrum. So spectrum is the airwaves that are out there that we can't see, but these airwaves are regulated by the federal government if you're listening in the United States. So for the wireless carriers, they can't just transmit their data and their services over the airways, not without getting proper approval, permits, that kind of stuff, to broadcast their signals over different airwaves that are being regulated. And one of the big things right now with 5G, there's all this talk about spectrum. So they need spectrum for the low band. They need spectrum for the mid band. They need spectrum for the high band. So spectrum comes in different frequencies. So typically with the lower levels of spectrum or the lower airwaves, those are generally designed for like your consumer electronics, for mobile devices, and then also too, like we talked about with T-Mobile a little bit earlier today, T-Mobile has this lower level spectrum that's going to be used to deliver 5G services to wider areas. So the lower the spectrum, the wider the signal goes, and then the signal is able to penetrate through walls, through trees, and other objects a lot easier. When you go higher up the spectrum level, the signals are actually get a lot faster, but they don't penetrate through objects, through buildings, through walls, and things of that nature. They actually bounce off of these things. So the signal is usually used for areas where it's usually used in areas where there's like a concentrated population. So for instance, the cell phone companies talk about dense urban areas. So like if you're like in a large city like Las Vegas or Los Angeles or New York, you would have spectrum at those higher levels to cover people in a large area or in a small dense area like that. So spectrum, just the airwaves that are regulated by the federal government, and then each country and each other parts of the world have their own ways of regulating and maintaining who is in charge or who gets to use the spectrum that's out there for use for transmission of data, for transmission of voice and other types of wireless services. So I hope this helps. This is my understanding of spectrum as I've been looking into 5G and other wireless technologies. This next question comes from Dylan, and he asks, what do you love most about working in customer service? So what I love most about working in customer service is I love working with the customers. So I talked about in the previous episode how I really appreciate my customers. I love them to death. And I have this thing about helping people. So when I get to help somebody by explaining a technical term to them or showing them how to use something that they may have not known how to use previously, that makes me feel good. And so that's the reason why I like working in this customer service field that I am in the telecom world. And the funny thing about telecommunications and the funny thing about IT is that it's actually pretty customer service centric. But the folks that are in this field aren't necessarily customer centric individuals. So it's kind of funny. So when I talk to other technicians, they prefer to actually work on the technical stuff, and then they don't really want to do the people or the face-to-face interaction. So I actually enjoy that. I actually like interfacing with different customers, and for that person to have that light bulb go off in their head, those are the moments that I love the most, and that's what I enjoy about the work that I'm able to do. So that's what I love most about working in customer service, is being able to serve the customer. And if it wasn't for these customers, we wouldn't be here. They wouldn't need us. And if they can do it all on their own, I mean, where would I be at? I wouldn't be there helping the customer out. So that's what I love about customer service, is actually working with the customers directly, being able to show them how to work something, and then continue to give them that education. And that's probably the reason why I enjoy doing this podcast as well too, is because I can give you this information. You can use it, apply it, or maybe even save it later for a situation where you may need it. So that's what I love about working in customer service. All right, so we made it through another episode. I really appreciate you listening today and you giving me your time and attention. I get to bend your ear just a little bit. So I hope this is providing the value that you need. And if you want to leave a rating or review, feel free to do that. Always looking for feedback. And once again, you can send me an email, jamal@thephoneguy.com. And you can leave your thoughts there as well too. Shoot me a question. And if there's anything that you want to hear, anything that you want to cover technical wise, anything with business, anything with, life or, personal development. So that's an area that I enjoy quite a bit. Let me know. We can make that a future episode. We can dive in deep in, we can have some fun with that. So I really appreciate your time and attention today. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk again soon.